The sun hung low over the endless prairie, spilling molten gold across the land. Wind swept the tall grasses in restless waves, carrying with it the scent of dust, sweat, and distant danger. On the horizon, a lone figure rode, his horse's hooves drumming a steady rhythm against the dry earth. His name was Thorn Callahan, a man known across the counties for his quiet strength, hard hands, and a heart that had grown lonely in the vastness of the West. Thorn was no stranger to danger, but even he could feel the tension thickening in the air that evening, a warning whispered by the restless plains themselves. He had been riding for hours, the heat of the day fading into a cool evening that promised both relief and unseen threats. His ranch lay miles behind him, a humble spread of land that he had wrestled from the wild with nothing but grit and determination. Life had taught Thorn to expect the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared him for what he saw that night, a figure stumbling through the grasses, half hidden in the shadows, moving with a kind of desperation that set Thorn's instincts on edge. At first, he thought it might be some lost traveler, a weary soul caught out in the wrong place at the wrong time. But as he drew closer, the truth hit him. The figure was a young Comanche girl, no older than 16 or 17, her dark hair tangled with dirt, a deep gash staining her side. Her breathing was ragged, eyes wide and wary, darting toward the trees as though she expected the very earth itself to rise against her. Something primal in her stance, in the way she held herself, despite the pain, spoke of courage few could claim. Her name whispered to him in a trembling voice later as Kaya. Thorn slid from his horse, boots crunching the dry grass, his voice calm but firm. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt you." His hand rested on the hilt of his revolver, not out of threat, but out of habit. He had learned the plains were a place where caution was as important as courage, and every sound, every shadow, could be the difference between life and death. Kaya flinched at the sound of his voice, but she did not run. Instead, she sank to her knees, clutching her side as a shiver of pain ran through her. Blood stained her clothing, a stark contrast against the golden grass around them. Thorn's heart tightened. He was a man used to hard labor. 2 long hours and harsh winters, but this raw. Immediate need stirred something in him he hadn't felt in years. "You're hurt bad," he said quietly, his voice carrying both authority and compassion. He knelt beside her, careful not to startle her. "Can you walk?" Kaya shook her head, eyes flicking toward the trees where the dark shadows hinted at the unseen. They are coming," she whispered. Her voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable fear buried beneath the words. Thorn's eyes narrowed. "Who's coming?" he asked. His voice was calm, but the tension in his shoulders told of a man ready for anything. "The warriors. 50 of them. They will not forgive," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her gaze met his, and in that moment, Thorn saw the truth of her words. She was not speaking of rumors or distant tales. She was speaking of real, imminent danger. Thorn had known the stories. The Comanche were a proud and fearsome people, their courage unmatched on the battlefield, their loyalty to kin unbreakable. Yet he did not see a vengeful enemy before him, he saw a girl. Fragile and bleeding, and he knew that leaving her to the plains meant certain death. He acted without hesitation. Using his jacket, he fashioned a makeshift bandage to slow the bleeding, his hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. Kaya flinched at every movement, but she did not pull away. She seemed to sense instinctively that Thorn meant no harm. Once he had done what he could for the wound, he helped her to her feet. Her weight was light, but even so, every step she took was a test of endurance. Thorn kept one hand steady on her arm, the other hovering near his revolver. The wind whispered around them, carrying a distant howl that set his nerves on edge. "You have a name?" he asked quietly. "Kaya," she replied. The single word was a mixture of defiance and trust. A fragile connection forming in the open plains. "Good," he said, nodding. "Kaya, we're going to get you someplace safe. My ranch. It's not far. You'll be safe there." For a moment, relief flickered in her eyes, a fragile hope against the shadows that threatened to consume them. But it was fleeting. The wind carried a new sound, faint at first, but growing louder, rhythmic pounding that made Thorn's pulse quicken. Horses. Many horses. And not just a few. The pounding was a thunderous warning that spoke of numbers and intent. Kaya stiffened beside him. They are close, she said. Her voice trembled with the weight of knowledge. The unspoken threat of vengeance that could not be avoided. Thorn's eyes swept the horizon. Through the twilight, the dark shapes of riders began to appear, moving with precision and purpose. 50 of them, as she had said, their eyes fixed on the small figures in the grass. Their movements silent but deadly. He tightened his grip on Kaya's arm, his mind racing. There was no time to turn back, no chance to flee without risking both of their lives. The plains stretched wide and open, the golden grass offering no real cover, only the illusion of safety. You hold on, he said, more to himself than to her. We're getting through this. Kaya nodded, trusting him despite the pain, despite the terror. There was a fire in her eyes now, a spark that refused to be extinguished even by the threat of 50 warriors. Thorn could not help but admire it. She was small, but her spirit was formidable, and he knew instinctively that this was a girl who would not break easily. The first rider broke from the line. A silhouette against the sinking sun, and the tension snapped like a drawn bowstring. Thorn's hand went to his revolver, ready for whatever came next. Kaya's breathing quickened, her eyes wide with anticipation and fear. The land around them seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, there was only the sound of wind, the distant hoofbeats, and the steady thrum of hearts beating in unison with the rhythm of danger, and then the first shout rang out across the prairie. A sharp, commanding cry that carried with it the promise of confrontation. 50 warriors, and there was no turning back. Thorn tightened his jaw. He would protect her, no matter the cost. But even he could not know what awaited them in the long shadows of the western dusk. Where danger and destiny collided on the open plains, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of smoke and iron, the unmistakable taste of imminent conflict. Kaya clung to him, trembling but not giving up. The wide horizon stretched before them, golden and cruel, and somewhere in that expanse lay both salvation and peril. And in that moment, as the first warriors rode closer, the prairie seemed to whisper its warning. The night would be long, and no man, no matter how skilled, could escape the reckoning to come. The hoofbeats grew louder, rolling across the prairie like distant thunder, and Thorn could feel the vibrations through the soles of his boots. Kaya leaned against him, her small frame trembling, but she refused to collapse entirely. Her dark eyes scanned the horizon, wary and watchful, as if she could somehow read the intentions of the 50 riders before they reached them. Thorn's mind raced. He had faced outlaws, wild animals, and the harsh fury of the land itself, but this was different. These were warriors, disciplined and unyielding, their eyes fixed on him and the girl beside him, as if fate had drawn them together on this stretch of golden grass. He tightened his grip on his revolver, then loosened it, knowing that brute force alone would not win this day. Strategy, patience, and a steady hand would matter more than raw courage. Kaya, he murmured, keeping his voice low so the wind would carry it away. I need to know everything you can tell me. Who they are. Why they're after you? She swallowed hard, and for a long moment she seemed unable to speak. Then, in a voice soft but firm, she began. My father. He was a chief, a man respected for his wisdom and strength. But some of the other bands? They thought he betrayed them. They came for him, for me, for my family. Her eyes glistened in the dying light. I ran, but they never stopped. Thorn's jaw tightened. Betrayal, revenge, honor, these were concepts he knew well in his own way, though in a different world. He had been raised on the plains, taught to respect life, land, and loyalty. And he understood that some debts could never be ignored. You're not alone anymore, he said quietly. I'll see this through with you, but we have to move before they reach us. They started toward a narrow draw that led to a line of trees and rough terrain. It was risky. Open ground would make them easy targets, but Thorn had memorized every inch of his land. If they could reach even the edge of it, He might be able to turn the terrain to their advantage. Kaya stumbled with each step, but Thorn's steady hand and quiet encouragement kept her moving as they went. Thorn's mind drifted back to the story of the land itself. His ranch had been his father's before him, a stretch of rugged soil that had demanded every ounce of endurance. He remembered the nights he had spent with his father, listening to tales of old Comanche raids and battles over water, of settlers clashing with tribes, of grudges that lingered for decades. Those stories were more than history, they were warnings. And now, as the shadows deepened and the distant figures of the warriors grew clearer, those lessons felt more immediate than ever. Kaya spoke again, her voice breaking the tense silence. They won't stop for anything. Not until I am returned. Not until they've punished those who wronged them. Thorn glanced down at her, noting the lines of tension on her young face, the set of her jaw, the way her fingers dug into the leather of his coat for balance. Despite her fear, she carried herself with a dignity that spoke of generations of strength and resilience. Then we make them see that you are not easy to catch, he said. We use the land, the wind, the trees. You'll need to trust me. She nodded, though doubt flickered in her eyes. She had been on the run for days, hunted by men who knew the plains better than most settlers ever could. Yet there was something about Thorn's calm, deliberate movements, the way he scanned the horizon constantly, that inspired a fragile hope as they neared the edge of the draw. The wind shifted again, carrying a faint but unmistakable sound, the faint twang of a bowstring and the soft clatter of weapons against leather. The warriors were closing in, and their approach was methodical, almost ritualistic. Thorn crouched low, guiding Kaya behind a small rise, and studied the open prairie that stretched before them. 50 warriors. 50 shadows moving like a tide across the land. He had faced danger before, but never numbers like this. Never an enemy with such precision and single-minded purpose. He remembered the first time he had met real danger on these plains. It had been a band of outlaws, but even then, the fear had sharpened his senses. Now it was different. This was not just survival. This was a test of wits, courage, and instinct. Every step mattered. Every decision could be the difference between life and death, Kaya whispered. Will they? Will they kill us? Thorn shook his head, though he did not speak aloud the truth. He could not guarantee anything. They might, he said quietly, but I won't let them. Not while I draw breath. The wind brought another scent. One Thorn recognized instinctively, the coppery temps of blood. The smoke of a distant fire, the faint earthy smell of horses moving at speed. He scanned the horizon again, looking for the first sign of action. The first indication of how the warriors planned to strike. There was none yet, but that only heightened attention. He knew from experience that silence before a storm could be deadly. Tell me more, Thorn urged softly. About your family, your people. Everything I need to understand. Kaya hesitated, then spoke. My father. He tried to keep peace with the settlers. He believed we could coexist. Some of our own thought that was weakness. Betrayal. When they attacked, I barely escaped the rest. They did not make it. Her voice faltered, the weight of memory heavy in her tone. I ran, hiding in the brush, moving only at night. I thought I could stay ahead of them, but the plains are wide, and some paths are easy to follow if you know the land. Thorn nodded, his mind working. This knowledge was valuable. Understanding their enemies' motivations, their patterns, and the history that fueled their pursuit could provide the edge they needed. Then we use that, he said. We use their assumptions against them. Kaya's gaze met his, wide and intense. Do you think I'll survive? Thorn did not answer at once. Survival was never certain, not on the open plains, not when numbers and skill and vengeance were stacked against you. But he could see the fire in her eyes, a determination that matched his own stubborn streak. If we trust each other, he said finally, we just might. But we have to be smarter than they are, and faster than the land allows. Ash! The shadows shifted, and Thorn felt the hairs on his neck stand on end. The first scouts were close enough now to see the small rise where he and Kaya hid. The warriors moved silently, but with a confidence born of experience and training. Thorn's pulse quickened, and yet, beneath the fear, a sharp focus settled over him. He had faced storms, outlaws, and the harshness of nature itself. But nothing demanded more of him than the responsibility he now carried to protect a life entrusted to him against overwhelming odds. He adjusted his grip on Kaya's arm, feeling the faint tremor beneath his fingers. "Stay close," he whispered. "We move when the wind shifts. We wait for the right moment." For a long time they waited, listening to the soft rustle of grass, the distant calls of the approaching riders, the whisper of the wind over the plain. Every sound seemed amplified, every movement a potential threat. Kaya leaned against him, her trust fragile but growing, and Thorn felt a quiet resolve settle over him. They were alone, but not powerless. They had the land, their wits, and each other. Yet even as they prepared, even as the night fell and shadows lengthened, the question remained, could two lives, one seasoned and one young and hunted, truly outwit 50 determined warriors in the heart of the untamed West? The prairie waited, silent and infinite. As the first signs of confrontation began to stir on the horizon, Thorn and Kaya crouched low behind the rise, the shadows of the approaching warriors stretching across the prairie like a dark tide. Every hoofbeat, every crack of a branch, seemed to echo in the still air, amplifying the tension that wound itself tight around their shoulders. Thorn's hand rested on his revolver, but his mind was running faster than any weapon could move. 50 warriors, all trained, all determined, and all guided by the fire of vengeance. He knew that a direct fight would be suicide, but he also knew that retreat without a plan was just as dangerous. Kaya shifted beside him, her breath coming in shallow, careful pulls. Her hand found his arm, gripping it lightly. "Thorn, why are you helping me? I'm not from your people. You could leave me, but you didn't." Thorn's eyes didn't leave the horizon. "Because it's right," he said quietly. "And because I know what it's like to be hunted, to be alone out here with no one to trust. You're not just anyone, Kaya. You're strong. Stronger than most people I've met. But even the strong need someone who sees them clearly." Kaya's gaze fell to the grass beneath them, and for a moment the fear in her eyes wavered, placed by a glimmer of something warmer trust. "My father. He believed in peace. Some of our people thought that made him weak. I saw what their anger did. I want to honor him, but I don't want to die doing it." Thorn nodded, understanding more than she realized. "Then we honor him by being smart. By not letting anger dictate our steps." He scanned the approaching figures, noting the way they moved in small clusters.
The way their eyes scanned the open prairie with deadly purpose.
"We use the land. Every hill, every tree, every shadow is our advantage if we know how to see it." As the wind shifted, Thorn noticed a faint trail leading away from the main group of warriors. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it suggested scouts, separated slightly from the main force. He leaned closer to Kaya. "Those men ahead. They're watching for us. Not just for our movement, but for our mistakes. We can use that. If we can draw them into terrain we know, we might gain a chance to slip by." Kaya's eyes widened. "We're going to fight them?" Thorn shook his head. "Not like that. Not with guns blazing. We'll fight with shadows, with misdirection, with speed. You follow my lead and stay low. Don't let them see your fear." The girl swallowed hard and nodded, her small hand tightening on his arm. Thorn could feel the tension in her, but also the resolve. He had seen it before in riders who had faced storms, in men and women who had survived attacks by fire and blade alike. It was rare, but it burned brighter than fear itself. From another ridge, one of the warriors broke from the pack, moving silently and deliberately. Thorn crouched lower, pulling Kaya down with him. The young Comanche's breath hitched as the man approached, his horse moving without a sound despite the weight it carried. Thorn studied him, noting the way his eyes searched, the faint markings on his armor, the patterns of his movement. This was not random. This was skill, honed and precise. "They're good," Kaya whispered. Thorn nodded, keeping his tone low. "They have to be. Otherwise, 50 men would never keep this pace across the plains without losing track of someone. But skill doesn't always mean patience. He shifted his weight slightly, testing the rise of the hill, measuring distances in feet and seconds. Watch the wind. Watch the shadows. And stay close. For a while silence stretched between them, broken only by the occasional whisper of wind and the distant echo of hoofbeats. Thorn's mind flickered briefly to his ranch, the fields of wheat, the corral with its restless horses. He remembered nights when the stars were the only witnesses to his thoughts, nights when he had felt the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. Now, that solitude had been replaced with urgency, with responsibility. Kaya was no longer a stranger. She was someone who depended on him, and he would not fail. Meanwhile, Kaya's mind raced as well, memories interweaving with fear and determination. She thought of her father, a strong chief whose wisdom had sometimes been misunderstood. She thought of her people, torn between loyalty and anger, between vengeance and honor. Every story she had heard as a child, every lesson learned in the shadow of firelight, came rushing back. She realized that survival was not just about running. It was about understanding motives, reading the terrain, and anticipating what others would do next. And for the first time since she had fled, she felt a cautious hope that someone had her back. Thorn motioned for her to move slowly, guiding her down the ridge and toward a small grove of trees that offered partial cover. Every step was deliberate, measured. He could feel the tension in the air, the unseen eyes of the warriors tracking them, calculating, preparing for the moment to strike. Every sound, every scent could betray their position as they reached the edge of the trees. A rustle in the brush caught Thorn's attention. He froze, hand on Kaya's shoulder. From the shadows emerged a young rider, separate from the main force. His armor glinted faintly in the last rays of sun, and his gaze was sharp, calculating. Thorn realized immediately that this was not a scout. This was a messenger, someone sent to test, to probe, to learn. "They're communicating," Thorn whispered. "They're not just hunting us blindly. Every movement we make, every choice, they're watching. We need to stay ahead in thinking, not just in speed." Kaya's eyes flickered nervously. "How do we do that?" "By being unpredictable," Thorn said. "By turning the land to our advantage. By making them believe we're going one way, then going another. By forcing them to react to us, not the other way around." The sun sank lower, and shadows stretched across the prairie, merging into the darkness that would soon cover everything. Thorn and Kaya moved carefully through the trees, using every contour of the land to hide their passage. Behind them, the hoofbeats continued, steady and unrelenting. As they paused briefly, catching their breath, Kaya whispered, "Do you think? My people will forgive me if I survive this." Thorn looked at her, noting the mix of fear and hope in her expression. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But survival gives you a choice. Death doesn't." For a long moment, they listened to the prairie, the wind, the distant sounds of pursuit. Every instinct, every lesson, every decision now mattered more than ever. The warriors were closing in, and the night would bring new challenges, new dangers that neither of them could predict. Meanwhile, unseen from a higher ridge, one of the warriors older, scarred, and calculating observed the pair. He had been part of the band that had chased Kaya for days, and his loyalty was tied to both vengeance and honor. Watching them, he noted the careful movements, the protective stance of the man with her. A flicker of respect crossed his eyes, though it did not diminish his resolve. 50 warriors, he reminded himself, would be enough to reclaim honor and restore what had been lost. Back below, Thorn guided Kaya toward a narrow creek, the water barely visible in the dimming light. Crossing it would give them slight cover and slow pursuit, but it was risky wet. Slippery rocks could betray their balance, and a single misstep might alert the warriors. "Stay close," he warned, stepping carefully onto the first stone. Kaya followed, testing her footing. Each movement was tense, deliberate. Every step a negotiation with danger itself. Above them, the night began to settle, and the shadows deepened. 50 warriors spread across the plains, scouting, watching, anticipating. And yet, even in the weight of numbers and skill, Thorn felt a sharp, unwavering determination. He would not let this girl fall. He would not let the plains claim another innocent life. Kaya's hand remained on his arm, her fingers gripping his coat. She realized that survival was not just about running, not just about hiding. It was about trust, courage, and the courage to face the unknown alongside someone who refused to leave you behind. And as the creek's water whispered past their ankles and the prairie stretched vast and unforgiving around them, both of them understood that the night had only just begun. The warriors would not stop. And the shadows held more than fear. They held decisions, mistakes, and choices that could change everything in an instant. The horizon darkened. The wind picked up, and the prairie seemed to hold its breath. 50 warriors. A wounded girl. A lone man willing to face them all. And in that moment, neither knew who would emerge from the night unbroken. Who would survive the coming reckoning? Or how far the plains would bend to test them both. The first echoes of movement rose again across the water. Subtle and deliberate. Thorn froze, sensing the shift. The game had changed. And somewhere in the darkening prairie, the warriors were closing the circle. The night had swallowed the prairie, leaving only the faint glow of stars and a sliver of moon to illuminate the landscape. Thorn and Kaya moved cautiously, the creek behind them whispering as if aware of the danger closing in. Every shadow seemed alive, every rustle a signal that the warriors were near. He could feel Kaya's hand trembling against his arm, but she didn't pull away. Her trust had become their lifeline, and he would not let it falter. "Keep your eyes on the horizon," Thorn whispered, his voice low and steady. "They'll try to hurt us, push us toward a mistake. Don't give them one." Kaya nodded, though her teeth were clenched, her small frame rigid with tension. She had learned long ago that fear could be paralyzing, but courage quiet. Steady courage could carry you through the darkest nights. And she felt that courage now, standing beside Thorn. Even as the distant sound of hoofs grew louder, from the ridge above, the warriors' shadows moved like predators. Their leader, a tall, scarred man named Takota, signaled with a subtle motion. The group spread out, creating a perimeter that slowly tightened. Takota's eyes never left the pair below. Every instinct told him that the girl was important, more than just a hunted target. The way she clung to the man beside her suggested trust, and that trust, in Takota's experience, could be as dangerous as any weapon. Thorn guided Kaya through the shallow creek. Each step measured, careful not to create a splash that could give them away. The water was cold against their legs, but it was a minor concern compared to what waited on the other side. He scanned the ground ahead, spotting loose rocks and uneven terrain. The land was harsh and unpredictable, but in that unpredictability lay their best chance. "They're dividing," Thorn whispered, noticing the warriors splitting into two groups, flanking them from either side. "They think they can trap us, but they don't know these trees, these rocks. Stick close. Follow my lead." Kaya's breath hitched as they reached a narrow canyon, the walls rising steep and unforgiving around them. It would slow their pursuers, give them a temporary advantage. But it was also a bottleneck, a place where a single mistake could be fatal. Thorn pressed his back against the canyon wall, motioning for her to do the same. The night air was thick with tension, and for a long moment, there was only the sound of their breathing and the faint echo of distant hoofbeats. Then came the first call, a low, commanding yell that cut through the darkness. The warriors were announcing their approach, not recklessly, but with purpose. They were closing in, moving with calculated precision. Thorn crouched, eyes scanning every shadow, every fold in the terrain. "They'll try to force us forward," he whispered. "We don't move until I say, 'Do you understand?'" Kaya nodded, her dark eyes wide but focused. "I understand." The first warrior emerged at the canyon's mouth, silhouetted against the moonlight. He paused, sensing something, then moved again. A subtle tension ran through his posture, a mixture of caution and expectation. He was skilled, trained to spot weakness, but Thorn had learned to hide it even in the most desperate moments. Thorn shifted slightly, guiding Kaya behind a protruding rock. The sound of leather against stone, the faint clink of metal, told him the others were not far behind. 50 warriors. He counted them silently, noting the gaps, the rhythm of their approach. Each step they took brought danger closer, but it also offered an opportunity to mislead, to misdirect, to survive. Kaya's hand tightened on his coat. "Thorn, do you think we can make it?" He didn't answer immediately. Survival was never certain, especially against odds like this. But he could see the spark in her eyes, the determination that refused to break even in fear. "We're going to try," he said finally, "and we'll make every second count." The canyon narrowed and the first group of warriors entered, moving slowly, deliberately. Thorn whispered instructions to Kaya, guiding her through the shadows, teaching her how to use the terrain to mask her movements, how to breathe quietly, how to trust instinct over sight. Meanwhile, Dakota and the second group circled above. Their strategy clear: force the pair into a corner, eliminate escape routes, and wait for the right moment to strike. Dakota's experience told him that the man with Kaya was skilled, but 2 people against 50 would eventually tire, make mistakes, falter, and yet he couldn't shake the sense that something about their movement was different, intelligent, cautious, deliberate. As the canyon twisted and turned, Thorn and Kaya came across a small overhang, a natural shelter. He motioned for her to hide beneath it while he positioned himself at the edge, keeping watch. The moonlight barely reached this far, giving them the faint advantage of darkness. "They're close," Kaya whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can feel them watching." Thorn nodded. "They are. But we've slowed them. Every step they take is measured by us. We're not just running. We're controlling the chase." Sudden noise, a rock shifting underfoot made Kaya flinch. Thorn's hand shot out, steadying her. "It's all right. Stay calm. Remember what I taught you." Her eyes met his, filled with trust and fear, and he realized in that moment how much depended on both of them. Their lives, their survival, the hope of escaping this night tit was all intertwined. From above, Dakota signaled again. The warriors moved closer, their shadows stretching along the canyon walls. They were cautious, aware that the man they pursued was not ordinary. Every instinct screamed that he was hiding something, that every step was calculated, deliberate, and dangerous. Kaya whispered about her past again, the brief flashes of memory that had led her to this night. She spoke of her father's wisdom, the lessons of survival and honor, the stories of resilience passed down through generations. Thorn listened quietly, knowing that understanding her history might give them an edge, a way to anticipate not just the warriors' moves, but the broader consequences of their pursuit. The canyon opened into a wider expanse, the edge of a plateau stretching into the darkness. Thorn scanned the horizon, calculating distances, estimating time, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. 50 warriors could not all be held off forever, but skill, patience, and courage could tip the scales in their favor. Kaya's voice trembled as she asked Thorn, "If we make it through this, what then? Will we ever be safe?" He didn't answer immediately, thinking of the plains, the ranch, the long nights and harsh days that had taught him endurance. "Safe is relative," he said finally, "but we'll survive tonight. After that, we take it one step at a time." A faint whistle came from above, a signal from Dakota. The warriors were advancing, closing the circle, preparing to force the pair into open ground where escape would be impossible. Thorn and Kaya crouched, every muscle tense, every sense sharpened to a razor's edge. The first warrior entered the plateau, scanning carefully. Thorn whispered instructions to Kaya, guiding her through subtle movements, teaching her how to stay unseen, how to control fear, how to use even the smallest shadow to their advantage. Behind them, the remaining warriors fanned out, tightening the circle, their hooves pounding the earth in unison. Thorn felt the weight of every step, every second, every choice. He knew the night would decide more than survival. It would test courage, trust, and the very limits of human endurance. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint scent of horses, leather, and smoke. Thorn signaled to Kaya, moving silently toward a rocky outcrop that could give them a slight advantage in the coming confrontation. Her hand found his again, steadying herself. The warriors were close now, the tension unbearable. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound magnified. Thorn whispered, "Get ready. Whatever happens, we stay together." Kaya nodded, her fear tempered by determination. She had survived this far, and she would not falter now. The plateau stretched wide before them. The last open space before the canyon walls ended in sheer cliffs. Dakota's strategy was clear: force them into the open and overwhelm them with numbers. But Thorn's strategy was just as clear: use the terrain, use the shadows, and turn every move into advantage. The night held its breath. The prairie, the canyon, the plateau, they all waited. 50 warriors approached, determined, relentless. 2 figures, a man and a girl, crouched low, ready to face the reckoning. The tension was at its peak, every instinct screaming that the moment of confrontation was imminent. And in that stillness, with the wind carrying the faint sounds of the warriors closing in, both Thorn and Kaya understood one thing with certainty: the night would change everything. The coming moments would test them like never before. And only those who could trust each other fully might survive the storm that waited on the plateau ahead. The first shadow moved forward. The first sound of horses broke the silence, and the prairie seemed to pulse with anticipation. The wind howled across the plateau, carrying the faint sounds of approaching horses and the low murmur of voices. Thorn crouched behind the rocky outcrop, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on him. Kaya pressed close, her small frame trembling but steady in her resolve. They had come so far, and now there was nowhere left to run. The 50 warriors were closing the circle, their disciplined movements deliberate and unyielding. Thorn scanned the plateau one last time, noting every rock, every shadow, every subtle rise in the terrain. He turned to Kaya. "We face them here," he whispered. "Together. Remember, it's not just about fighting. It's about staying alive, staying smart." Kaya nodded, her dark eyes fixed on him. "I trust you," she said simply. There was no hesitation in her voice, only quiet determination. That trust gave Thorn a surge of strength. He had faced countless dangers alone on these plains. He had never had someone rely on him like this before. The first group of warriors reached the plateau's edge. Their leader, Takeda, signaled with a sharp motion, and the remaining warriors fanned out behind him, creating a formidable wall of movement. Thorn and Kaya remained hidden in the shadows, their presence almost imperceptible. Thorn's heart pounded, but he moved with calm precision, guiding Kaya behind a larger rock that provided cover and a vantage point. Takeda's eyes swept the plateau, searching for any hint of where the pair might be. His experience told him that the man with the girl was clever, that every move was calculated. Still, he believed numbers could overwhelm skill, and he trusted the discipline of his warriors. 50 against 2, how could it fail? Thorn took a deep breath, steadying both himself and Kaya. He had learned to fight in the open and in the shadows. But tonight, cunning mattered more than force. He scanned the edges of the plateau, noting a narrow path that led down toward a hidden canyon, barely visible in the moonlight. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. "Follow me exactly," he whispered to Kaya. "Step where I step. Don't make a sound. We move fast, and we move smart." Kaya nodded. She had been running for days, hiding in shadows, and now she trusted Thorn completely. Together, they edged along the rocky cover, inching closer to the hidden path. The warriors' eyes scanned the plateau, but the terrain was uneven, full of blind spots. And Thorn used every one to their advantage. A single misstep sent a small rock tumbling down the slope. Kaya froze, heart hammering. Thorn's hand shot out, steadying her. "It's okay. They didn't see us. Keep moving." They slipped down the narrow path, careful to stay low and move silently. Behind them, the warriors began to sense their movement. Dakota's sharp voice rang out, commanding, signaling the others to spread and search. The tension was unbearable. Every step, every sound, every breath counted. The path led them to a small canyon, narrow and concealed, with walls high enough to block the moonlight. Here, they paused, catching their breath. Kaya's dark hair clung to her face, sweat and dust mingling on her skin, but her eyes were bright with determination. Thorn looked at her, silently acknowledging her courage. "They're still coming," he whispered, listening to the distant sounds of hoofbeats echoing against the canyon walls. "We have to keep moving. Once we reach the far side, the land opens up. My ranch is close. Safe ground." Kaya's lips trembled as she spoke. "I never thought I'd survive this night. I'm glad it's you with me." Thorn gave a faint, reassuring smile. "I'm glad it's you. And we're not done yet," he pressed on, moving carefully through the canyon, each shadow and rock used as cover. The warriors were close, but the narrowing walls forced them to spread, slowing their advance. Thorn knew every second counted when they finally emerged from the canyon. The moon was higher, casting silver light across the open plains. Thorn spotted the familiar outline of his ranch, in the distance its fences, the small barn, and the lights flickering inside. Hope surged in him. They were almost there, but the warriors were relentless. Dakota led the charge, his eyes fixed on the pair as he realized their direction. "Do not let them escape," he commanded. "Push forward." "No mistakes." Thorn grabbed Kaya's hand. "Run," he said. "Straight for the ranch. Don't stop." They sprinted across the moonlit prairie, the sound of hoofbeats chasing them growing louder. Kaya stumbled, but Thorn caught her, steadying her as they ran. Every step brought them closer to safety, but also closer to confrontation. They could feel the tension building, the final moment approaching. Suddenly, Ryder broke from the main group, charging directly toward them. Thorn's heart raced. He pushed Kaya ahead, drawing the rider's attention. A quick maneuver, a roll behind a rock, and the rider passed without harm. It was a risky distraction, but it gave Kaya the edge she needed as they neared the ranch. Thorn signaled the other warriors to the edge of the property. His horses were restless in the corral, but their noise provided cover, masking the sound of approaching footsteps. He had used every lesson from his life on the plains to prepare for this moment. The final stretch was the most dangerous. 50 warriors, determined and relentless, closed in fast. Thorn pushed Kaya to run faster, using every ounce of energy she had left. They leaped over fences, ducked behind barns, and sprinted toward the main house. Inside, the warm glow of lanterns offered a small sense of safety. Thorn pushed open the door, pulling Kaya inside. For the first time in hours, she was free from immediate danger. He closed the door, bolted it, and leaned against it, chest heaving. The sound outside was muffled, but still present. The warriors had reached the edge of the ranch, but now the fight changed. Thorn had the high ground, knowledge of the land, and the advantage of defensible positions. He could see Dakota signaling frustration to his men. The chase had ended, but the night was not yet over. Kaya sank to the floor, exhausted but alive. Thorn knelt beside her. "You're safe now," he said softly. "For tonight at least." She looked up at him, eyes wide with relief. I didn't think anyone could protect me, but you did. You saved me." Thorn shook his head. "We saved each other," he said. "You survived this night because you trusted me, and I survived it because I had someone worth protecting." Outside, the warriors had paused, considering their next move. Dakota's eyes scanned the ranch, then he signaled his men to retreat. Respect had grown between hunter and hunted. Thorn had proven himself, and Dakota understood that vengeance would not be won by force alone. The warriors melted into the darkness. Leaving the ranch and its lone defenders behind, Kaya let out a long breath, finally relaxing. I thought it would end differently." Thorn smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Sometimes, surviving is the victory. Sometimes, the right choices matter more than strength alone." The night settled into calm. Lanterns glowed warmly in the house, horses whinnied softly in the corral, and the wind whispered across the plains. Thorn looked out the window at the wide expanse of land he had called home, thinking of the long, lonely nights he had endured here. Now there was someone by his side, someone who had brought courage and trust into his life. Kaya stood beside him, her hand brushing his. "What now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Thorn said, We heal. We rebuild. We live. They walked outside together, the prairie stretching endlessly before them. The threat had passed, but the lessons remained. Trust, courage, and the bond between two people could overcome even the darkest night. And as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky with gold and pink, Thorn and Kaya stood side by side, looking out over the land that had tested them, challenged them, and now held the promise of a new beginning. The night's danger had ended, but the future filled with hope, resilience, and possibility was just beginning in the quiet that followed. Both of them knew one truth. They had survived together, and that survival had forged a bond neither fear nor vengeance could break. The prairie stretched wide and free, the sun climbing higher, and for the first time, the world seemed full of promise, laughter, and life. The night was over, but the story of Thorn and Kaya of courage, trust, and survival would live on, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of standing together in the face of danger. The prairie was still, the wind whispered, and the ranch, once a place of solitude, had become a place of hope. They had endured. They had survived. And now, finally, they were free.